Dan Christensen, it's so good to have you on the Christian Coach podcast. You were a blessing to me as a college coach, and I know you are to so many others. And we're just excited to hear more about you. But we like to get right into it here on the podcast. So, what does it mean to you, Dan, to be a Christian coach?
Well, I think, as Christians we're called to glorify God and enjoy his creation. And so I think, simply as a college coach, you're trying to glorify God with how you run your program and how you interact with your players and everyone that you come in contact with, and really show them how to glorify God and how to enjoy him. And I think even if you're not, my background is at a Christian college, but even if you're not at a Christian college, I think you can still do that. And either way, you have these athletes for a short amount of time, whether it's a year or 5 years, and just trying to leave an impact on them to have them see, hey, this is what it means to be a man or woman of God. And so I think that's really what it means for me, and to be a Christian coach. And yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And are you willing to share a little bit about just your backstory on your upbringing, how you ended up there at Gordon, just faith, sports, all of that?
Yeah. So I grew up. Both of my grandfathers are pastors, and so I grew up, in Christian household. And um, my dad's dad and my dad, they both went to Gordon College. My grandfather actually went to the seminary, I think, there, but my dad went to Gordon College, and so I knew about it. And when I was looking at schools, I looked at Gordon and didn't really know if I would go there or not. I basically was looking at kind of Gordon and some other bigger schools that were not Christian schools, and so but just loved it, and so I ended up going there. And I played high school tennis and basketball, and ended up playing college tennis there. And as a student, I was also working with the men's basketball team, doing stats and some different things, just kind of as a student assistant, and really loved that. Enjoyed my time, and so that ended up leading into coaching at the college level at Gordon, once I graduated, both with basketball and tennis. So
Gotcha. That's
yeah.
awesome. That's awesome. And then you went on to coach for Gordon. Can you just share about the process of going from a student athlete there to becoming the coach? And yeah, what did you learn in those 3 or 4 years as an assistant coach there at Gordon?
Yeah, so I mean, going into it, I think any athlete kind of understands the basics of, as a coach, you run practices, you coach in games, you call plays, you do all that kind of stuff. But I think the biggest thing for me, just actually being part of it and joining the athletic department, is that there's just so much that goes on, behind the scenes that people don't always know about. And I really just kind of, there's a lot of details and things that maybe can be frustrating, and a lot of work, but there's so much fun and enjoyable parts of really building a program that, again, people don't really know about, with building culture and recruiting, which is what I've kind of gotten into. And so I really enjoyed those parts of being a coach, and being able to interact with these athletes, and Gordon Christian College. So it was definitely a big part of what we did, and just being able to, be part of the lives of these college kids for the few years that I had as a coach. And I really loved that part of it. But yeah, I think just kind of learning behind the scenes what it takes to kind of run a program and run an athletic department and all that kind of stuff was definitely eye opening. And I loved it, and I feel for coaches of, all the different things that they have to do to be successful. So
Yeah. Did your head coach give you some freedom in the recruiting process there? Like what were your roles as an assistant coach?
yeah, so I was more so heavily involved with recruiting for tennis, and so I did a lot of kind of like the initial reach out and follow up, and that kind of thing. And so um, tennis, it's nice, as there's UTR rankings, and there's things like that that make it a little bit easier to kind of see levels of players and stuff like that. And so I just had fun just going out and finding kids. But obviously, with the being a Christian college, that's an important part of what we were looking for. And so it's an added challenge, but it kind of helped make it easier for us to kind of define who was right for us. So I just like, being able to kind of figure out how much they were interested in that, and just understanding their challenges and what they were looking for. And so I did do had a lot of those conversations, which was fun.
Yeah, that's great. It's so cool that you had that hands-on experience as a coach practicing recruiting, and that led into the work that you do now. But I'm just curious, can you tell me the process of leaving Gordon. How did you hear about Dan Tudor? How did you take that step of faith to kind of leave the coaching profession and jump into the consulting business world?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So as a coach, my head coach would always, pass me Dan Tudor's articles that he'd put out every Tuesday morning. And I listened to the podcast that he started while I was a college coach. And so I was kind of paying attention to what he was saying, and there was a lot of good stuff that was helping me, just because, like many coaches, you don't really have a recruiting background when you get into coaching. You kind of have to figure it out kind of on the fly and learn from people. And so I was kind of paying attention to him, and it got to a point after I was there for 4 years, and it got to a point where I just kind of felt like God was calling me to try something different. And we knew we wanted to start a family, and coaching isn't, not breaking news to everyone, but if you're an assistant coach, especially at a smaller school, the pay isn't the best. And so trying to figure out financially what we could do to support the family a little bit better. And I actually had an opportunity for a few months to do something different. It was recruiting, but it was for like a healthcare medical recruiting thing, and did that for a few months, and it was terrible. It was not it was not something for me, and I did not like it. And so it was kind of a hard time of like, man, I got out of something that it was a lot of work, not a lot of pay, but I loved coaching, and I'm doing something that just really didn't love. And so I started looking for other opportunities. And it was either on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I saw that Dan posted that he was looking for people to join his team. And so I just reached out and was like, hey, I'm interested. I'm not loving what I'm doing right now, and I would love to hear more about it. And so we had a conversation, and that's kind of how it went. And so, yeah, a little bit like a 3 month gap or so kind of between jobs, but I went from that to working with Dan Tudor, and it was definitely something it was hard. It was a big decision. I think just being a student and then working at Gordon, it was a big jump, because it's now you're a professional, now you're a coach, but I was still at a school. I was very familiar, so this was kind of the first time getting out of my comfort zone and doing something different, and that kind of thing. So it was kind of a big jump, but I'm enjoying it. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Cool to hear the leap of faith. And for me, kind of how our worlds collided, I guess, was I got hired. I was up in Champaign, Illinois when I got my college coaching job. I was 26. This was in 2014. Brad Dancer, the head men's coach at Illinois, got breakfast with me, and I was picking his brains, asking questions. And he said, with recruiting, you have to just enroll in Dan Tudor's stuff. And so got down there, read Selling for Coaches. And for any coaches listening, the premise of the book is coaches know their sport, but maybe they don't know how to recruit or how to sell. And so that book was so helpful for me in understanding that. But as you think about just the Dan Tudor system, could you give maybe 2 or 3 kind of bullet points, kind of big picture ideas, and like what help are you guys doing in the recruiting process?
yeah. So I think, like you said, it's something that a lot of coaches, very few coaches get into college coaching because they are really good at recruiting and they love it and they just want you to do that. And so, yeah, sports are cool, and building a team is cool, but I really want to just recruit. It's usually the opposite. It's usually like, all right, I love the team, I love the X's and O's, and I love that. Now I got to figure out the recruiting part of it. And so that's kind of the point of what we do, is try to help coaches and figure out how to be more effective recruiters quicker, instead of, you can learn by trial and error, and it can take years of making mistakes, and that'll happen, inevitably. But trying to help coaches figure out how to recruit, how to sell their school, sell their program, because that's what recruiting is, and try to give them those kinds of skills. And again, it's just something that isn't really required to be a college coach, but then once you get in, it's one of the most important parts of the job. And so we're trying to build, bridge that gap there of the lack of experience and skills with sales and recruiting. And a big the biggest part of what we do is research. And so for almost 20 years, Dan has been doing research with student athletes, asking them, how do they want to be recruited? How do they want coaches to communicate with them? What are they looking for? What are the main factors in their decision? We could just guess and try to figure out and get into the mind of a 16, 17-year-old kid, but we figured, let's just ask them and figure out what they want. And so trying to do that every year to stay on top of how they think, and use that to give college coaches tips and advice. So
Yeah, and I remember in one of my last years down at my college, you and I talked around COVID. You gave an awesome presentation to my college, and I was able to get a one-on-one phone call just to pick your brain on some of those trends, like in the middle of COVID. But just maybe in the past 2 or 3 years, has you or your team, what kind of research have you guys kind of seen or gathered? Any changes in the market?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I think they've always been important and always been an emphasis, but I think after COVID and just the way things are now, there's an added emphasis on just being able to effectively talk about cost with the kids and with their families, because um, you know, unless you're able to offer a full ride scholarship, which the majority of college coaches can't, they're going to be paying something, and so they're gonna have to make that work. And a lot of kids and their parents, they're worried about that. They're scared. They don't understand, how financial aid works and what that can look like. And they see these sticker prices of 50, 60, 70, 80,000, and so it's just very overwhelming. And I think the more that coaches can be comfortable talking about it and sharing what it looks like at their school and trying to be transparent and that kind of thing is just super important. And even more so now, I think, with a lot of families struggling financially and with the costs rising and all that. During COVID, a lot of people lost their jobs, and so trying to talk to these families about how they can pay. And I think for coaches, it's hard because it can be uncomfortable to talk to someone about paying, 10, 20, 30, $40,000 to come play a sport at their school. And so a lot of coaches tend to just put it off. Like, we'll recruit them, we'll get them to fall in love with us, and they'll apply, they'll get the financial aid, and we'll figure it out then. And I think coaches waste a lot of time on kids that's not going to work. If they can't afford more than 5 or 6 thousand and your school costs, 20 or 30,000, they're not coming. It's
Mhm.
even as much as they could be a good fit. Um, Probably not worth recruiting that athlete. And if you can figure that out on the front end, um, and the other part of that is involving the parents. I think we can talk to the kids and they can kind of give you an understanding, but the parents are the ones that are usually writing the check at the end of the day. And so, trying to encourage coaches to continue to emphasize talking about finances early on as much as you can, and give them a clear picture. It's going to make the rest of the recruiting process go much smoother. And you might end up having to turn down some kids and lose some kids to cross them off the list early. But I'd rather do that than, again, spend 3, 6, 12 months, talking to a kid that it's just never going to work out.
That's good. On the money side, um, do you have any tips for the coach, like how to press into those buttons? Because as I was recruiting all on partial scholarships, the student athletes are always like, "Yeah, coach, I got no money. I got no money. I got no money." It's pretty typical. So just for them to be honest and say, "Hey, this is what I'm looking for." But any tips for a coach as they're in those early conversations with a recruit?
Yeah, yeah. I think trying to come up with some kind of estimate, and there are, some schools are able to do things like pre-reads, and some have, the net price calculator. We talk about that a lot. Some schools it's somewhat accurate, but at least just giving them some kind of range of like, hey, this is what it could look like. Let's have a conversation about it. How do you guys feel about that? Um, and see what they say. And talking about, hey, other schools that you're looking at, is this kind of what you're seeing? Just to really understand, if they're saying, hey, there's no way we can afford, 15, $20,000 a year, and then they tell you they're looking at 4 other schools that it's going to cost about the same to go there, you can maybe call their bluff a little bit, but just try
Mhm.
to guide them through. And just approach it in a way of knowing that it's stressful for them, and they're scared, they're worried about if they can afford it. And so knowing that and being empathetic to that and just saying, hey, I want to help you, I want to be honest with you, I want to just help you through this process. The more that you can do that, the more you'll build trust, and all that helps. So
That's good. That's good. I remember as a coach, 27, 28, just starting out, thinking through like, I don't think my kids would be able to afford this, So I think that was sometimes a hard thing to sell when, um, but yeah, is there any other research that comes to mind that you've seen here recently, that you'd be willing to share?
um I think, again, going back to the parents, obviously there's the financial aspect of that, but we're seeing it increase more and more just how involved they are. um Even the kids or the parents that tell you, hey, I'm handling it as the athlete, or hey, my kid is gonna they're gonna figure it out, it's their decision. um Over and over, we're hearing feedback from kids that say, hey, my parents are helping me narrow down my choices, they're giving me opinions of schools, they're helping me coordinate my campus visits, they're helping me apply, or maybe even doing my applications to schools. And so they do so much, and I think a lot of coaches are scared to talk to the parents or just don't want to, because it takes more time. And hey, I don't want to have the parent that's emailing me all the time and bothering me, and I want to talk to the athlete, I want them to be mature and be able to handle this. I think for a lot of these kids, that they just don't know, and so the parents don't know either, and we need to be able to guide them. And the more that you can build a relationship and build trust with them, increases the chance that they might be willing to spend the extra money to go to your school versus the school that's cheaper, or be willing to even come visit campus because the parents trust you, they like you. Um, I think a lot of coaches wait or don't talk to them for different reasons, and I think that's something we're continuing to see be effective and something that most kids really they do want. They want their parents' help, and so if their parents are involved, then they can help them better and all that. So
That's really good. Being able to effectively talk about cost and then still recruiting and building the relationship with the parents. I think that's really, really good advice. And this month we're trying to talk about just time management. We know that coaches' time is just so squeezed. The pressures of work. Sometimes they're growing a family. And so just in general, I know that your business can help save time because they're going to learn from you, learn from the lessons, and help them have more success. But just do you have any, there's not really a shortcut to being a great recruiter. But do you have any little time hacks, like something that you see coaches maybe wasting extra time on that they could learn from you on?
yeah, so I think one thing that we talk a lot about is establishing the timeline of your program, your recruiting, because I think what most coaches do is they just rely on the athletes. Whenever they make their decision, whenever we've kind of filled up our class or whenever we've run out of recruits, that's when we'll be done. And that's hard. That's frustrating because for a lot of coaches, that's gonna run into April, May, June, July, for that fall, and that gets frustrating. That's a lot of time, and it takes away time that you could be spending on the next class, or again, the million other things that you have to do as a college coach, or a parent, or a husband, or a wife, and so figuring out what the timeline looks like for your program and explaining that to recruits and saying, hey, this is kind of when we're going to be done, and sticking to it. And I think a lot of coaches are scared of that because they're like, well, what if they're not ready, but they could decide later, or what if I find the other recruit, later on. There's all kinds of things, and you can handle those. But ultimately, you trying to be in control of your program helps you because you can figure out when you want to be done and just be done by then. Now, there's all kinds of things you need to do leading up to that to make that work. And so we talk a lot about timelines and establishing that, and we're letting recruits know and reminding them, hey, this is when we're going to be wrapping up. And what recruits tell us is they actually like that because it shows that the coach is guiding them, they're in control, they know what they're talking about, and gives them some time frame to work with, because a lot of kids, they don't know how to make their decision or when to make their decision. And so they're gonna, if they don't have kind of a deadline, a timeline of when they need to make a decision by, they're gonna delay, they're gonna take more time, and that's more time for you, the coach, that you're spending recruiting them and just trying to stay in touch and keep up with them. And um, if you could be done, weeks or months sooner, on your terms, that can save you so much time throughout the year, and help you feel more in control of, what can seem just like a chaotic job, all kinds of things going on. It's something that you can control and you should be able to control as a coach. And so we help coaches with that a lot, trying to get them to figure out what the timeline looks like, because it's going to be different for every sport, division level program, depending on where they coach at, all that kind of stuff. But I think that's really important. Timelines, figuring out what that is, and being in control of it so that you're not wasting a
Yeah.
lot of time just completely relying on the athletes, to make their decisions.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I wonder if other coaches listening in are stubborn, maybe like me. And just after it seemed like the student athletes that drifted and like, I need another week, I need another month. It's like they never came back and signed, something was holding them back. But there's something stubborn in me that's like, I'm gonna keep trying. I'll keep sending the text, keep making the phone call. But that is probably a time waster. That's really good. And other than the timeline, do you see any other hacks? I'm thinking about like technology or any other time hacks that you might see to help coaches in recruiting?
Yeah, so I think the more that you can plan, the better, with your communication, and what are you going to be sharing with these kids on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis. A lot of coaches just don't really have a plan for that. It's kind of reactive. Who's
Yeah.
who's responding back? Who are we talking to? And like, hey, something came up, and so I want to share that with them. But there's no real plan, and so it ends up being a much more random recruiting process, random recruiting communication, and um, the more that you can kind of plan that out of like, hey, this week we're going to share something about this. And then going into tech, like you said, using some kind of platform, some kind of, software, there's a bunch of them out there. A lot of our coaches use ARI, things like that, where you can go in and put your messages in and schedule them out, or just have it all kind of, mapped out, planned out. that can save you a ton of time. If you're sitting there writing, emails from scratch or copying and pasting over and over again, things like that take a lot of time. So that's one thing. And then with social media too, I think that's another one where a lot of coaches struggle. For a lot of coaches, it's just not their strength. But it's important. It's something that is important to building your brand. And so what I encourage coaches to do is, try and do it all ahead. Again, going back to planning, plan out your social media. What are you going to be posting? Don't make it reactive. If you just post when you think something comes to your head and you feel like, hey, this would be something good to record or show, it's going to be inconsistent and it's going to take you a lot of time. And so, planning, hey, here's what we're going to do. And so there's all kinds of platforms that you can use to schedule out social media on different platforms and do it in advance. And so I think that trying to map that out and plan, hey, here's when I'm going to send my messaging out and we're going to schedule it and all that kind of stuff. There's lots of things like that that I think can really save coaches a lot of time. But some coaches, it's again, just, they don't know what's out there. So
It's really good. It's really good. And just if I could get an inside scoop into maybe your life or the Dan Tudor company, I'm just thinking about time management skills, any personal things that you do as you're managing a lot of relationships, managing a lot of technology. How do you do this in your personal life?
yeah, so I think for a lot of it is again just being able to kind of schedule things out and prioritize really what's going to be the most important thing and what's going to really help me right now with what I need to do the most. And um, I use a product called Notion where I can do. There's a lot of different things it can do with like I have a little database of coaches that I'm talking to, but I have just all my tasks and I can schedule them out and kind of tag them. And I know there's a lot of things kind of like that, but I use that along with my Google Calendar just to be able to schedule things out. Like, hey, I know I just talked to this coach. I know I'm going to have to follow up with them at some point. Schedule it, put it in, get it down, because life is chaotic and you're not just going to remember everything. And the more that you're trying to remember in your head, it just things get lost. And so just trying to get it done, forget about it, and then it pops up on your tasks for the day or your schedule. Then I use that a lot just to help with, hey, I need to follow up with this coach, or they've got an upcoming game, I want to wish them good luck, that kind of thing. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Going back just for a minute on social media that you talked about building the brand for the coach. I feel that's like, just in the last 10 years, that's like the 5% or 10% of margin in life that's like squeezing, just like a little bit more that you have to take care of and manage. But just didn't know if you had any coaching for the coach out there. Obviously they have busy schedules, but they know they need to be on, other than the planning out in the organization. Like how would you encourage them to use social media in their brand and their recruiting?
yeah. So I think the thing, specifically talking about recruits, when they go to social media to look up a program or a coach or something, they're trying to understand, what do they really like? What's their personality like? What does the team do kind of behind the scenes for fun? Am I going to fit in with them? I'm going to get along with them. They're trying to figure out that kind of stuff. And so the more that you can just put that's personal and just showcases who you are, who your players are, who your athletes are, and what they're really like, is better, because kids really want to figure that out. They can go to your website, they can go figure out what the latest score was and who got player of the week, and things like that, which it's fine to post those things on social media because people want to know about it. But for recruits, they're really trying to figure out, like, am I going to get along with this coach? What are they really like? I've been getting all these texts and emails from them, but like, are they fun? Like, are they going to be someone that I'll get along with? And I think the more that a coach can put into that to really showcase kind of who they are, it can help get kids to say, hey, I like that. But it might also get kids to say, actually, I don't really like that. I don't think I would get along with that coach or that team. And that's okay. That helps save time, because now you're not talking to this kid that isn't going to be a good fit, because we figured out, hey, we're just personalities. It's not going to make sense. And so if we didn't put that out on social media, we might not have completely uncovered that. And that can lead to issues if they come on campus and then it just doesn't, it's not a good fit. They transfer out. And so the more that you can do that, I think it helps.
Yeah.
Again, going back to saving time with who you recruit is helpful.
Yeah. What about platforms? Just for the coach, he's like, hey, I'm not cool enough. I'm not cool enough for TikTok type of thing. But yeah, what are high schoolers, college players, like what would you say the coach has to be doing, or how would you advise that coach is trying to sort through it?
Yeah. By far, Instagram is still the top one. we have some, I don't know that remember the exact numbers, but our admissions, we have an admissions branch of our office, and they combine with niche.com and do a survey every year with classes. And one of the questions they ask is like, where do you go? Where are you going to look up things on social media and learn about a school or a program? Instagram by far is the number one. So if you're a coach that you're like, again, thinking about Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, like it's all a lot. I don't really know. Just focus on one, focus on Instagram. That's where most kids are at. Um, TikTok and then actually YouTube are kind of the next two. YouTube used to be number two. TikTok has kind of surpassed it, but those are kind of the next ones up. But even
Sure.
those, it's a big gap between TikTok and YouTube, and then Instagram's still up here, at least
Gotcha.
for the current recruiting classes.
That's helpful. That's
Yeah.
helpful. Just want to almost go back to the start, or just zoom way out, for that coach listening, thinking about becoming a great recruiter. Like people say, like recruiting is the lifeblood of your program. It's so important if they want to sustain their career. Just kind of how would you maybe define or describe, like if we say like this person is a great recruiter, like what does it take for Dan Christensen to say like this is what it means to be a great recruiter?
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people think, when they think of recruiter or, salesperson, they think of kind of the used car salesman or someone that's just kind of, sneaky and slimy and that kind of thing. Those aren't the best recruiters that I work with. They're not like that. They are, a lot of them even aren't super, super extroverted, but they're the ones that really focus and listen, and they pay attention to recruits and build that relationship really well and ask really good questions and really do a good job of keeping the focus on why these kids should want to choose them. That why, I think that's important. A lot of coaches will throw a lot of stuff at kids and say, hey, here's what we have, here's what we're, what we have to offer. But why do these kids want that? Why does this, should the 16, 17-year-old kid want a, 13 to 1, student teacher ratio? Like, what does that mean? Like, what, they don't know that. And so we'll throw
Yeah,
these facts at them, but great recruiters are able to, explain why, explain how this makes sense and how this is going to impact them. And really focus on building that relationship, because at the end of the day, when we ask recruits, what are the main factors in your decision, the same three things typically come up. It's how the coach made me feel, how the athletes made me feel, and how the campus made me feel. So it's all about that feeling and that emotional connection that they have with the people involved. Those are the main things. And so building those relationships, building that trust, it's going to be more important than getting the brand new shiny facility, because even if they like that, but they don't really like you and they don't have a connection with you, they're probably not going to come. So those kinds of things are what the best recruiters, I would say, are able to do.
I love that. I love that. Really good. The feeling matters so much. And then next time when we have you on, we'll have to just get into the campus visit, maybe, because I know you guys are experts at that as well. But just think about time management. I know you have a growing family. You're working so hard with Dan Tudor. Just kind of some daily habits or routines. Just I know your faith's important to you, but how are you kind of daily or weekly trying to keep your faith strong?
Yeah, yeah. So I think it is, for me. It's trying to plug in and stay involved as much as I can with my churches. So my wife and I both volunteer with the youth group at our church, and so it's a way to stay involved and have some responsibility that if I didn't have, it would be a lot easier to just kind of put it to the side. But I love that, and it's great to be able to work with students and learn myself. We have a great youth pastor at our church, and so I'm able to listen to what he has to say and getting connected. We have a small group that we are part of with other parents of young kids. We meet on Zoom at night because that's the only time it's even possible to sometimes be able to meet. And so we do that. And so just trying to connect with other Christians and learn from them and be able to share with them and that kind of thing, I think is important, because it can get very easy to get kind of overwhelmed and consumed by the kids and by work. And so I think that's helped me a lot. So,
That's awesome. That's awesome.
yeah.
This is so good. I'm so glad that we got this time together. And we just like to end each episode just in prayer. So is there anything that we can be praying for you or Hannah about?
For sure, yeah. I mean, I think our kids are young. We got a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old, and so we're still new to this. We're trying to figure out how to be parents and how to do a good job of that, as well as be a good husband as a father with this extra responsibility. And so just always that. I think that's always important. Trying to have prayer for how to handle everything that they're going through, and that But then just with work too, always, I'm trying to give coaches the best advice that I can to help them, and we take that seriously because it's their career. This is how they make a living and how they are feeding their families and paying for their homes. And so it's an important job, I feel, because recruiting, it can get, we say, it can get you hired and can get you fired. And so we want to be given the best advice. And so just always prayer for the what we're able to share with coaches and how we're able to help them to be better recruiters so that they can thrive in their career. So yeah, those would be two things I'd say.
Yeah, that's good. Let me pray for you right now.
Thank
Lord, thank you, God, just for this time. Thanks, God, for Dan. Thanks for Hannah. Thanks for just their heart for you and for excellence. Just pray that you would guide them and bless them in this tough season of raising a 2 and a 1-year-old. Just give them grace, help them to have your love for their kids. And I do pray that their children would grow up to know you and be world changers in whatever arena that you send them to. Just pray for Dan's work too. I pray that you'd bless that and just help him continue to serve well with all the coaches that he gets to work with. And I ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.